Hi, Keith and Sherry Maxwell. Thank you for choosing me to help with your first draft of your financial plan to discuss your retirement goals. And throughout this meeting, we're going to take a look at how you're going to meet those goals. Again, I want to thank you for instilling the trust in me. As the CFP board states, I am your fiduciary, so I act in the best responsibility of you to help you get to where you want to be. The purpose of today's meeting, I'd like to spend some time reviewing the CFP board standards on the financial planning process itself, educate you there. Then I want to take a look at current assumptions that we've inputted into your plan that will affect short-term goals and also long-term goals. And from there, we'll take a look at recommendations on specific items that you've addressed in your concern for your financial plan. And at that time, I'll also make recommendations for you, and then going forward, we'll be able to monitor those recommendations. The CFP board has a specific financial planning process standard that it likes to follow. The first step of that process is to evaluate our relationship. And as you can see within the packet that I've provided you, our letter engagement states our terms of business. It'll talk about our fee and our services going forward. And what we like to do is at least once a year sit down with you and review your financial plan to make sure we're on track to reach your goals. And if we aren't, we'll implement some structure on how we're going to get there. After we establish our relationship, which we've done at this time, it's important for us to take time to gather information from you. Gathering necessary information such as your personal balance sheet, your statement of cash flows. I'd like to take a look at all your other outside assets as well, insurance statements. And from there, we'll take a comprehensive overview of your current financial status and make projections based off of our assumptions going forward. After we've gathered the information, which we've done at this point, I like to take time, and my team like to take time to do some analysis. We analyze the information, put together a draft of your financial plan, and come up with certain recommendations for you. So after we analyze your financial strengths and weaknesses from the information you've provided, that's where we develop the plan itself. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time today on, since it's our first meeting together, is developing the financial plan, sitting down together, making sure we're on track for your goals and get an understanding from each party. So after we develop that plan, then from there, we're going to implement our recommendations. So after today's meeting, you're going to see specific recommendations that I have for you, and we're going to implement those. And that's a process, and that takes two parties. That takes me, your financial planner, to do what's best for you and educate you on how you can reach your goals in retirement. And also, it's going to take some work on your part, right? Meeting with your estate planning attorney, meeting with your accountant to make sure things are on track. I'll be the quarterback in that whole situation, but really it's up to you to sign the documents and be okay with everything going forward. And the final step in the whole planning process is monitoring the recommendations. I like to call your financial plan a living document, right? Things change every single year. And that's just part of being a human being and living life, right? So when items change, that's also going to change the outcome of your financial plan. But I'm here at your service based on our agreement to help you get to be where you want to be. So that's a little bit about the financial planning process in itself. I do want to review current economic conditions or assumptions that we're going to project off of going forward. So today you have inflation at 2%. College funding, right, for your three little ones is about 4% during today. Also, you provided me with a pre-retirement expected investment return of 7%, and that's also verbatim going forward with post-retirement investment return of 7%. Given today's current low interest rate environment, mortgage rates are for a 15-year 3.5% and a 30-year 4.125%. And at the end of the plan, I actually want to talk about that. You didn't come to me with a specific goal in mind for your home, but you finance your home at 9.25%. And there's a way we're going to be able to save almost 50% a month on your mortgage payment. You've provided me with your tax return showing that you are in the marginal tax rate of 25%, living in 0% state tax. And also in terms of income, Sherry, you're projecting 5% going forward, year in and year out in salary increase. And Keith, with Uncle Jay's, you're projecting 3.5 every single year in, year out going forward. And finally, life expectancy, right? In terms of planning age, you want to go with 87. Based on longevity history in your family, 87 seems reasonable. Now for the goals that we're going to talk about today in this video. The main goal for you is retiring at age 62, 25 years out as you're 37 now. And with your life expectancy at 87, you'll have 25 years of retirement where you need your dollars to work for you, right? So that's the number one priority today, is how are we going to get you to retire at 62, help you realize what you need to save each year in order to retire at 62 so your dollars can last 25 years, right? We're projecting life expectancy again at 87. The next goal we're going to talk about is tax filing, right? So you provided a brief overview of how you file your taxes, and it does seem to be last minute, based on maybe your family situation, having 3 little ones, but because of that, you're using the standard deduction. And I want to show you a way, not only that'll help you stay organized, because you'll need to keep receipts throughout the calendar year, but also you're going to save money on your taxable income. Right now, I'm assuming you're using the married filing jointly standard deduction of $12,700. But there's a way you can itemize your deductions because you own a home. You have an interest expense. So I want to lay out the financial picture if you were to itemize your deductions versus just filing with the standard deduction going forward. We'll also touch on an insurance needs analysis, and also touch a little bit on Sherry and Keith, your investment plans, making sure you are aggressive investors, making sure the risk you're taking is producing the return that you're expecting, right? And then from there, talk briefly about your estate plan. I have a few recommendations there that you'll want to meet with a estate planning attorney on. And then we'll talk about conduct within the CFP board, and also we'll wrap up with some additional observations that I've noticed. So again, the main goal that you have is retiring at age 62, 25 years out from today, needing 25 years for your dollars to last until 87, what we're projecting. Right now, you've requested that your pre-retirement income of 80% in today's dollars, accounting for salary increases that we just touched on, is your base living expense in retirement. So in order to figure out the calculations on what you'll need to make your money last in retirement, first what I did was I took a look at your current salaries today, right? 80% of that value, and inflated that based on the salary increases you had previously stated and we touched on earlier in this video, to come up with a number. And excuse me here, I'm going to pull up the financial plan for you. So Keith, right now you're making $76,000. 80% of that, $60,800, right? So your present value is $60,800. We're going to inflate that again, 3.5% over 25 years, giving us a future value of what your salary is going to be at age 62. 80% of that, I'm sorry, $143,685. Sherry, we use the same formula and come up with your salary at that time is going to be about $154,959, right? And then also, since you're retiring at 62, you're going to need income to supplement Social Security. So what I've done is, if your full retirement age benefit is 67, right? Now it's typically said that anyone who takes their benefit at 62 will have about a 30% reduction. So 30% reduction off of 50,000 is 35,000. So I took your combined amounts, right, of 80% of your pre-retirement income inflated at age 62, less that 35,000 accounting for Social Security. And then we figure out what your payment is. Overall, the capital amount that is needed to support you for 25 years, $3,937,225. May seem like a lot today, but we're going to give you a few recommendations on how you can increase your annual savings. Now, if you break down the payment that's required each year, in order to get to that $3,937,225 amount, that payment's about $62,000 a year, $62,249 a year. So what I'm going to suggest is you begin contributing as much as you can to your retirement accounts. Keith, you should begin maxing out your IRA contributions. Sherry, at least go ahead and put enough funds into your 401k, percentage-wise, that you're comfortable with. I'd say at least 10% at this time. And as the little ones get older and you don't have those education expenses, that's the time when we start making catch-up contributions and possibly maxing out your 401k, right? So now I want to talk about tax planning. Again, we briefly touched on this before, that Keith and Sherry, in terms of tax filing, you're not the most organized. And that's okay, right? That's why you hire professionals to take care of those responsibilities. Married filing jointly using the standard deduction of $12,700 is not your best option. Again, you need to look at what allows you to itemize your deductions. And because you have a home and you have a mortgage on that home, which ultimately incurs an interest expense, you're able to itemize your deductions. Now, there's many categories that you can itemize your deductions with, right? So the first big item you need to look at is your interest expense for calendar year 2016. Now, in order to do that, I don't have the number that you provided me, but I calculated it myself. So what I did is I figured out what your mortgage payment is today, and then I did an amortization schedule to look at what your total interest expense has been over the calendar year 2016. And that number, you can see in your hard copy financial plan, comes out to $9,196.75. So right there, you're able to itemize that amount. And then when I look at your cash outflows for the year, I notice that you are charitably inclined. You had a $4,000 cash contribution to your church. Well, guess what? You can itemize that as well. So those two numbers right there put you over what you're using for the standard deduction each year, ultimately lowering your taxable income. Not only that, but then you have your property taxes of, I believe the amount's $2,657. So in total, those numbers are going to lower your taxable income versus the $12,700 standard deduction. But it's also important to realize that the itemizing your deduction also allows you to stay organized. And you've mentioned to me several times that you're not the best at record keeping. Well, it's important when you're dealing with Uncle Sam that you have a good record keeping system. And I think you should really start to itemize your deductions. You'll benefit from a taxable income standpoint, a tax standpoint, and also for a peace of mind standpoint, staying organized. The next big item on the list, I don't think I mentioned it in our overview, but Keith, you were approached to do a 1031 exchange, right, with Tom, your neighbor over at Uncle Jay's. And ultimately you had another choice, right? You had another choice to just sell the property basically for what it's worth today, $84,000. And I did an analysis on what you should be doing with that opportunity and your rental property in itself. So what I did is there's a 1031 calculation. Once we adjusted the basis off of Aunt Betty, that basis came to $31,692, and I'll show you here in your handout. And the sale of the rental property, right? You have a fair market value of $84,000. Again, the basis $31,692. A total gain off of that amount $52,308. Times your tax rate would produce taxes of about little over 13,077 to be exact. So you're going to have proceeds after the sale of $39,231. Okay, now if you were to do a 1031 exchange, you wouldn't have a recognized gain because of the small mortgage that you're going to take on, right, of $16,000. So your options really, do you sell the property and realize a small gain now and use the proceeds for shorter term goals such as education or retirement savings, or do you take a risk? Do you double Uncle Jay's in size? Do you have the capacity to do that? Not only that, from what you've stated, you would have to incur a cost of $75,000 for an additional investment just to renovate the other building to make it workable. Okay, and it's not only the $75,000 expense that has me concerned. It's also the small mortgage that you'd be taking on at $16,000. I don't think at this time you need to take on that debt or go forward with that additional investment. I think at this time it's extremely important for you to clean up your balance sheet, maybe use some of those proceeds again for short-term goal or longer-term goals, such as education or retirement saving. Again, I'm going to refer to the financial plan hard copy that I'm giving you to look at the numbers, but my rationale is that unless you're feeling like doubling in size long term, you're going to be able to have the attendance and hire the staff needed for Uncle Jay's and have the capital to do so. I don't see it being the best option today for you. Again, if this opportunity presents itself down the road, I told you that we're going to monitor your recommendations, and at that time we'll take another look at your financial picture, and maybe at that time it makes sense. But right now I think it's important to prioritize, clean up your balance sheet, putting your kids' education first, and start saving more towards retirement, because that $3.9 million number I gave you at the beginning of this financial plan, that's a lot of money, and you're going to have to save about $60,000 to get there. So let's now talk about a life insurance need for you. Life insurance, there's a few different methods, and what I like to do is I actually like to use the life insurance needs analysis, right, where we kind of estimate what your costs are going to be going forward if anything were to happen to either of you. Based on your balance sheet or your personal statement of assets, what I've calculated are your liquid assets. So I took all your retirement accounts, your cash accounts, anything that's easily converted into cash. I added those numbers up. So what I came up with is $252,573,000. Your current liabilities to date are $118,036. Now, after my research, I'd probably say that average funeral expenses are about $20,000. Could be 20 to 25. We're going to go with 20,000 for our calculation today. So I'm going to take the difference between those three numbers, right, and come up with basically what your available resources is, things that your heirs could easily convert into cash and help pay for those expenses. We're going to say your dependent income to get them to where they want to be is about $250,000. Education needs You'll see in the hard copy of your plan, we're not going to go over it in this video today. Education needs in total for your 3 kids, it's going to be $432,804 to be exact, on what you're going to need to fund their education, assuming they're going to a 4-year school. Okay? And then also spousal retirement, based on what your spouse is projected to need at retirement, $632,271 is what I come up with. Okay? And then we have your emergency fund, 3 months worth of income. Combined income for the both of you comes out to just over $33,000. So your total insurance needs, after we sum up all those numbers I just laid out to you, $1.3 million. Now, if I look at your current insurance statements, you do not have adequate coverage at all to meet these goals. $1.3 million. So I'm going to actually subtract your available resources, which we touched on, of $114,000. So your insurance needs analysis says you need over $1.2 million in coverage. Each of you should have that, actually, to be able to allow your spouse, if anything were to happen to you, to fulfill their retirement goals and also help out with the children's education, right? So here's my suggestion. You don't have adequate coverage, not even close to cover it. So what we need to do after this meeting is I will run some term insurance quotes for you. And then from there, we'll look at what the best option is, and I'll get on the phone with you and we'll review next steps going forward. But I think what you should do is you should look at a 30-year term option. Basically, that's going to get you to retirement, right? If anything were to happen to one of your spouses, it'll cover you up until retirement. It'll help get you past your children's education goals, right? If anything were to happen. And also, it's going to cover the life of your mortgage. So those 3 items alone, and the flexibility of term itself, have me thinking that we should talk about 1.25 million in term coverage over a 30-year period. And I think after this meeting, again, I'd like to run some quotes for you going forward, and we'll work with an insurance specialist to get you the best product that you need. Now, the next item we can briefly touch on is your investment funds, right? Sherry, you're currently invested in a 403B, which is a great employer plan. It's a riskier fund, right? And risk happens to be measured in terms of beta, which is a statistical measure of volatility of a fund versus the overall market. And the market is defined as having a beta of 1. So in looking at your current investment, the beta is 1.43, indicating that it's a lot more volatile than the market itself. So using a formula that we call the capital asset pricing model, which allows you to assume your assets expected rate of return, it's basically a form adjusted return on how much risk you should take. So when I go ahead and calculate your capital asset pricing model, it's about 16.67%. And because that number is higher than the 7%, and you're an aggressive investor, I'm going to warrant that investment decision, right? It's producing the return that you want. Right now in your time horizon, you are more aggressive, right? Because time's on your side and the market's going to continue to be volatile, especially 25 years out when you talk about retirement. So as we approach retirement and become closer to that target date that you have, maybe it makes sense, right, to just monitor the risk within that fund and maybe find another fund that your 403B offers to help mitigate some of that risk, again, as you approach your retirement age. But right now at 37, based on the CAPM, 16.67, outpacing your 7% target, I suggest you stay forward with it, okay? Keith, you talked about making a $4,000 contribution into your IRA in 2017. Again, my recommendation is to max out your IRA contribution at $5,500, especially because your cash flows allow you to at this time. And you want to put money into Stock G, right? The whole investment amount, $4,000 into Stock G. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I know a lot of people speak on diversification, but basically, when you adjust your weights of your current portfolio, Stock D that you hold is about 32%. Stock E is going to adjust to 38%. Stock F would adjust to 17%. Then Stock G would just be about a 13% allocation based on a weighted return, calculating your return to be about 9.57%. If you were to add Stock G into the portfolio. And again, just as we talked about with Sherry's 403B, I'm going to warrant that decision. And the reason I'm going to warrant that decision is because that 9.57 outpaces your 7% expected rate of return. In your time horizon right now, it makes sense to be more aggressive, right? Especially as you want to save for retirement in your early years. And just like we talked about with Sherry, when the time comes, we can tail back some of that risk, right? So go ahead. You have my permission to invest in Stock G. One of the last items I want to touch on with you is your estate plan. Now, you've come to me and you said you have simple wills, but I think it's really important that we're going to sit down and talk about prioritizing items in your estate plan because it's so complex. Estate planning is not easy. Ultimately, I'm going to refer you to an estate planning attorney to help you draft certain documents that I'm going to recommend today. And if you have any questions going forward, again, we're going to monitor the recommendations after we implement, okay? So my thought on your overall picture, where you are today in your estate plan, simple wills are great. But what's important to me is to address situations that may arise in terms of if one of you were to get severely hurt or ill, incapacitated in any form, right? What impact does that have on your spouse? What impact does that have on your children? And your children, to me, it should be the focal point. So the first recommendation I'm going to make is you should appoint guardianship. You should have someone associated within your family or a close friend that's going to be listed as guardian. If anything were to happen to both of you, who's going to watch over your kids? It's a tough decision to make. But you need to make an educated decision with that. You need to weigh the pros and cons of several choices, and ultimately that person's going to act in your best interest if anything were to happen to you for your children. Okay? The next thing that I think you should both do is draft a power of attorney document. Typically you see power of attorney listed as each spouse in this case. And also you should begin to draft a durable power of attorney for health care. Again, if anything were to happen and you're unable to comprehend the situation, what's going on at the time an incident happens, it allows the durable power of attorney for health care to step in and act. And basically that does not come valid until you are legally incapacitated and cannot make a decision. Then that person will come forward and make recommendations on your behalf, again, acting in your best interest. The final item that I want to touch on today with estate planning is implementing a revocable trust. And the reason I recommend implementing a living revocable trust is because the trust is for the benefit as you as an individual, as a grantor, and also the trustee making decisions while you're living. But the trust allows, not only is it a good tool to get assets out of your name and put them in the trust name for estate planning, but also if something were to happen to you, the terms of the trust actually allow for more control. Say you don't want the children to have access if they're beneficiaries of the trust until they're age 25, until age 30. We see that in our industry all the time. You have age limits on when children especially can have access to funds within the trust. A revocable living trust would allow for certain guidelines that say, again, say Brentley can't have access until you're 25, so it allows for more control once you're gone, which will give you peace of mind, right? Knowing that your children aren't going to inherit money and just spend it right away. Waiting until they're mature enough to understand the situation and have access to that capital is very important. So again, those 3 items are the most important items today that we need to implement. And in order to do so, I have a referral that I'm going to send you their contact information to help you draft those documents that we talked about. An item that you talked to me about, Keith, before the meeting regarding Tom and having certain statements available for the calendar year, I can't do that. Tom requested information that is readily available. Now, I'm not going to share any information unless you give me the okay and permission to do so, but I can't lie to him, right? Because the CFP board has specific conduct guidelines that they like to abide by. And one of the most important services or duties of my practice that I offer is integrity, okay? And integrity demands honesty and candor, which can't be subordinated to personal gain and advantage, okay? And that applies to you as well. If I'm going to be doing an illegitimate act on your best interest, I can't do that, right? I lose my job. I lose my license doing that. Now, if it was a personal error, human error happens every single day, right? But this is being deceitful in practice, and I cannot do that. And I'm going to refer you to the CFP Board of Conduct that I have laid out and drafted for you in your written copy of your financial plan. Okay? So based on everything we've talked about today, I do have a few additional observations, and I'm going to refer to you to the hard copy financial plan for the specific calculations. But I gave you the amount that you would need to save until every year until age 62 to help you make your capital last for 25 years. But here's my final recommendation at this time. Don't throw out the possibility of retiring at a later age, at age 67. I know ultimately you want to retire at 62 and that's your goal, and we're going to get there, right? Or we're going to do our best to get there. But you need to look at the other options of retiring at a later age because it's going to be better for you long term. Not only is it going to be better for you long term because you have 5 additional years of work under your belt, but you also have 5 less years in retirement, right? It doesn't sound ideal, but there is a difference in retiring at age 67, and it comes in the amount of about saving $44,444 a year compared to the number I provided you with that said $62,249. Again, it's accounting for your salary increases and 80% of pre-retirement income today, accounting for those inflation or salary increases going forward. But also, it would allow you to hold off on taking your Social Security, hold off on reducing your benefit by about 30%, and taking your full retirement age benefit, a combined amount of $50,000 each year. You're allowing your delayed retirement credits from 62 to 67 to grow 8% a year, okay? $50,000 a year for life with a small cost of living adjustment. We should really continue to monitor the impact of retiring at 67 financially. It would be less of a burden for you as you have shorter term goals, which aren't necessarily cheap by any means, right? Education is not cheap today. 4% inflation might be on the low end. And inflation actually, realistically, college inflation could be closer to maybe 6%. So just a thought and something I want you to be aware of, the financial impact today of retiring at 67. Okay, the last item I want to talk to you about today, and we touched on it briefly when we first started our meeting, and you purchased your home 6 years ago, right? Your mortgage was $104,000 over 30 years, but what really stuck out to me, 9.25% interest rate. That's a lot. That's a high rate, right? And given our current environment, our economic environment, rates are at their lowest. You have a 15-year mortgage at 3.5%. You also have a 30-year mortgage at 4.125%. That's half of your rate that you financed your mortgage with only 6 years ago. So I did a little calculation for you, and basically, if you refinance currently, your current mortgage balance, $98,830, if you refinanced a 30-year mortgage at 4.125%, you know what your monthly payment would be? It would be $504. If you refinanced at 15 years, your payment, $706. That's amazing. I think from a financial standpoint, you're used to a payment of about $855 a month. Okay? There's two options on the table that are both going to benefit you, but here's my thought process. You have current cash flows that are resulting in a surplus, right? If you do move forward and you sell your rental property, you're not going to have that rental property income or expense, right? It's a wash, but you're going to have some proceeds after your sale that you're going to use for education, retirement, and possibly helping out with other cash items that you need, maybe even this mortgage. I think what's important is that you're used to an $855 payment. Let's start aggressively paying off some of this debt, and I think we should go with the 15-year refinance. At $706, that's still over $100 some dollars less than what you're paying now. So you're already accustomed to that payment of $855. So you're still saving about $140 a month in your payment, but you're paying it off at an accelerated rate, 15 years versus 30 years. Aggressively paying down your debt at this time, as you get closer, 15 years out, as you get closer to retirement in 25 years, you have a 10-year period where you can start shuffling that cash that was set aside for your mortgage payment. That can all go towards retirement, right? And that's a way we can increase our contributions and help increase your savings. So again, my recommendation is let's move forward with the 15-year refinance. If that's okay with you, I want you to take time and think about it, but ultimately that's my recommendation. So I know we covered a lot today, right? We covered retiring at age 62. We covered tax planning strategies. We talked about your investments. We talked about estate planning. I talked about the conduct and also a few additional recommendations that we just reviewed. I think the biggest takeaway is that this is the first draft of your plan. And again, it's a dynamic document that is constantly going to change, right? But I'm going to be here, as we've stated in our letter of engagement, for you to provide my service if any item changes, right? If anything changes in your financial picture, you call me and we make these recommendations, or we make the analysis and then come up with our recommendations, and again continue the process of just monitoring our results. Ultimately, we want to get you to retire at 62. That's my goal. That's your goal going forward. This is a two-part relationship, right? I make the recommendations, I help you implement them, but also that's going to take some effort on your behalf. And again, I just want to thank you for putting your trust in me to be your financial planner. And again, I'm your fiduciary. I'm going to act in the best interest for you. So if there's anything I can do in the meantime before our next meeting, please give me a call or stop by the office. Take care, Keith and Sherry. Thank you.